Are you feeling the calling to start or grow a business that is so aligned with you and everything that makes up who you are? Do you know that there has to be a way to do this without so much hustle and without chasing the latest shiny objects, but you're just not sure how? You can definitely have a dream business that improves, not consumes your life, that allows you to work with soulmate clients while helping you and your family financially and in all ways. You can elevate yourself to be the entrepreneur who has all of her desires. I'm going to show you how on the Elevated Femmes movement. Hi, welcome back to another episode of the Elevated Femmes movement. Today I'm joined by Catherine Cantey. She is CEO of Cantey Advisors. And Catherine has a lot of experience working with women in the corporate world. And she is here to share with us some of her wisdom, some of her stories. And Catherine is actually also a great podcast host. I was a guest on her podcast recently, and I can't wait to ask you some questions about your podcasting journey, Catherine. So welcome to the show. Please tell us a little bit more about you and your journey of starting your online business.
Thank you, Julia. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm so glad we got to connect at my podcast. And then now I'm excited to be able to talk to you. I love your journey and your past and where you are now and where you're going. It just sounds like a lot of fun, and have a great deal of respect for folks in the fitness industry. And so you obviously have the discipline. So now as you are in the podcast business, you have a proven track record. If anybody can get up and exercise and lead people and live in the fitness world, I think you're a self-motivator. So I'm sure you'll continue to do great. Yeah. So we got to chat a little bit, and I've got, a number of different stories. I don't know which ones you want to hear, but I spent close to 25 years in corporate banking, and really just grew as much as I could and got to a point where I was beginning to wonder what else might be out there. And as we kind of chatted before, you're talking to people at the gym, or you're talking to coworkers kind of under the radar, and you just kind of dream a little bit. And I remember having I think it was like a lunch and learn, that it was just something that I was doing on the side, and a coworker of mine, we both just joked, we'll only do this for so long, and then something else is going to happen, and we're going to jump at that. And so we took this online course, and it was in the office just for an hour, just for us to follow through this book. And needless to say, I think I'm the one that took the jump and got out of corporate. But I knew I had to figure something out. And so that's where the executive coaching came in, because I was working with so many CEOs and just spent so much time in corporate. It just felt like a natural bridge. But I also know that when I got out here on my own, I had to find my voice. And that's where podcasting came in.
Wonderful. Wonderful. So 20 years working in corporate, climbing the corporate ladder. I'm sure you had a pretty good job, after all those years. And I think it happens to a lot of us where we get to that point where we have to make the decision of like, okay, I'm either going to keep doing what I'm doing, even though I know that this is not the thing, or I can take that leap, I can take that chance. And I'm going to saying goodbye to a pretty decent salary and, all the perks that we get from being a salaried employee. But you chose to take that risk. Can you tell us a little bit about what that was like, of just, making what probably was a really tough decision?
Yeah, it didn't happen overnight, and I can't encourage you, if you truly do want to do that, start talking about it sooner than later. When I got married, I was married kind of young at 22. And I remember telling my husband, I said, look, you can, because he's a serial entrepreneur, I said, you can do whatever you're going to do the startup businesses and figure it out. And he had businesses from an early age of 14. And so that's just what his background is. And I said, that's fine. I'll be stable. I'll figure it out. I want to take as much experience as I can. Corporate is a fantastic opportunity to get to travel and get to see people and just get to learn so many wonderful things. And I had the best time working in corporate, but I also knew in the back of my mind, it's going to be 20 years of working with corporate. And then I'm going to hit tag, you're it to my husband and tell him it's his time because I'm going to quote retire. And I just said that because that was like a loose term and there was no commitment. So I was going to retire from corporate after 20 years. And folks that are really close to me, they said, well, you've been talking about this for 20 years. This is not like something new or earth shattering. You've always said you were going to retire at 40 and you'd figure it out. I mean, it was about 42, 43. And so it just seemed like a natural thing. And it also allowed me to give him the space that he needed to go start whatever it was that he needed to start, because he needed to have that bandwidth and that experimental time. And yeah, 2 decades is a long time to experiment, but 2 decades is a long time to be in corporate. And so it was just something that evolved. And then as it got closer, 3 to 5 years in to getting really close to turning in that famous last letter of "it's been fun," I began experimenting. I hired a coach to help me just to be able to have that conversation. I didn't need to talk to my husband about the business details, but I needed a business coach to talk to. And she took me down step by step, and I didn't know where it was going to take me, but I knew I could take the next step and then get a little bit of clarity or get less confused than I was before, and then just take the next step. And it was literally step by step, meeting with a business coach every 2 weeks, and she'd give me a little to do. And I was curious enough to go do it. And then as we inched down to probably the last 6 months before I actually took that leap, he said, hey, take a full week of vacation, just take the vacation time and figure it out. And that was my husband saying, take it and see if that's really what you want to do. Lined up customer calls, lined up all these lunches, went around, talked to people. I was like, this feels right. And so then that was in March. And then June 1st, I turned in my letter. My last day was June 30th of 2019. So, and even then, within the first few months of going out, I'd already had 2 or 3 years of just kind of working and getting that cadence going, and not necessarily doing projects, but like building the website and like building out what the service descriptions are and building the newsletters, even though you're like, I don't know if they're going to see this or not, but you begin to just build it out. And it's not like people are out there trying to find you at that point, but you're able to stumble and learn and try new things. And then within a few months, it was my existing CEOs that came back and hired me to do work for them once I left corporate. So making sure that you keep all those relationships going and the conversations going and continue to serve your network continues to pay you well. And even the first year out, it was 6 figures. So I was able to replace, that salary that I thought was just like fantastic. And I'm just stuck here because I'll never make money doing anything else but work in corporate. And it turned out, if you're good to people, they're good to you. And if you provide value, they pay money for it. And as I got into this, I was like, gosh, this is actually pretty great. And my husband said, if I'd known you were going to be this happy, you should have quit 10 years ago. So it was a 20-year journey in the making, probably 25-year journey in the making. But if you're interested in it, just start talking about it sooner than later and find those people that you can talk to, because you're going to wear your husband out if you constantly go back to him to talk about a dream. But begin to hire people to invest in yourself and see where it goes.
Yeah, definitely. That's a great lesson. It's it's important to talk to your partner or whoever else might be a part of the decision. But in the end, I think it's important to talk to people who have been in your shoes and who are ahead of you, because they're going to be the ones who can actually lead you, right? Like a spouse, even if they're an entrepreneur. My husband's not an entrepreneur, so he's very, very supportive, but there's a lot of things that he just doesn't get. He loves his corporate job. He does great doing what he does, but there's just some things that he doesn't get. And sometimes I'm like, okay, I can't, I'll just, I'll explain this to you some other time. Let me message my coach about this question or this issue, right? Because
it's so true, because you can be talking, 2 entrepreneurs can be talking to each other, and you're both going to have different solutions. That's the great thing about being an entrepreneur, is you're going to attack it in 2 different ways. And just like you're saying, you've got a spouse in corporate and one that's an entrepreneur, or if you got 2 in corporate, they may handle it differently too. So you got to find somebody who's going to build you up during this process and be that sounding board. And it took me a while to figure out that my spouse cannot be everything I need. And it's not fair for me to expect him to be able to do that. And I need to be able to go find, the best people that I can at the time to be able to work through whatever growth that I'm going through. And I feel like it takes a little bit of stress off of the relationship at home too.
Oh, I bet 100%. And I can honestly say that, I mean, for anything, even if it's something related to the kids, right? When we're always going to our spouse for our concerns or, support, it starts to wear down on that person, right? Like it's just, we like to in our relationship, and this is a bit of a side topic, I guess. But hey, relationships, we all have relationships. We all need to know how to improve our relationships. But I think that sometimes when we expect, like you kind of touched on it, but like when we expect one person to do all the things for us or to answer all of the things for us, it just it causes some friction there, right? So it's so much better to almost have like dedicated people that we go to support us with different things. And that's the beauty of coaching. I think the beauty of coaching is that you can have somebody who can guide you and can be the expert in that specific field, right? And that's why there's also things like parenting coaches and different things like that. So we don't have to just rely on our spouses for every little thing. So speaking of growth, Catherine, so you have a podcast too, and you've been podcasting for a little while. And first of all, so like I mentioned to you guys listening or watching that I was a guest. So I got to experience what being a guest for her podcast was like. And let me tell you, she has a very smooth process. I love how, you get videos that tell you, these are the things, these are like my ideal people. These are the types of things you might want to think about when you are, talking about things. So I felt very prepared to be able to come on there and provide value that actually would resonate to a listener of your podcast. So I just wanted to commend you on your process, not just like the questions, but just like also the reminders. Got me thinking, I'm like, oh gosh, do I send enough reminders for my podcast? And then even the post-production, receiving, the feedback, that was also great. So, Catherine, tell us a little bit about your podcasting journey. I'm giving people kind of like the details of the being a guest process, but can you share with us a little bit about, being a host and what that has been like for you? And maybe even share like what made you decide to start a podcast of your own?
I think that's a great question. And I could probably, how you just do something small every single day. Like you go to the gym every single day, but you don't really think about it and you're just doing it. And I feel like podcasting is that way because I started a couple of years ago and I just do a little bit every day or my virtual assistant does a little bit a day. And then over time you look at it and you're like, oh, well, I guess we got more than 2 episodes recorded. I mean, we've got quite a few now. And you just kind of wonder, oh, how did that happen? But it's because we just do a little bit a day. And it may not be every day. It may just be a little bit every week. But the point is you just have to get started. And when I was working with one of my first business coaches and I was still in corporate, everybody was doing all these newsletters and blogs and all this typing. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to shoot myself if I have to sit in front of a computer and type. Like it just feels like this is not going to be fun. But I got to figure out how to get content. And so what I ended up doing was she said, well, you can just talk to people. I'm like, well, how does that work? She's like, how about podcasting? You could guest on other people's shows. So we start researching this. And just because I'm curious, I'm like, how do you guest on a show? And so I came across something called Podmatch. And it's a way for a guest to log in and talk about what topics they want to talk about. And different podcast owners will look at it, hosts will look at it and say, oh, I could have this person on the show, or you can reach out to people through this network. It's kind of like a dating site, but for podcasting. And I was like, okay, well, I don't know if I really want to commit to podcasting, but what if I just jump on a couple and see how it goes? And so I jumped on a few shows and I thought, well, this is fantastic. I really like this. Like And these people that I got to meet, they were fantastic. And I'm sitting in my little house in South Carolina and talking to people literally all over the globe. And I thought, this is pretty cool. So we get into that. And I hired a different virtual assistant for this because I wanted someone just to do the reach outs, because just like you do cold calls with business development, I don't even know how many hundreds of people we reached out to, but I ended up getting 25 bookings and confirmed shows in 6 months. And for me, I didn't want to see all the rejection of like just people not responding or whatever happens. Like, it's just a process. So through Podmatch, we found all these names. The lady reaches out to them, which you cannot hire a virtual assistant soon enough in your life, because you need to have that extra time to just do anything but the tedious work. So even if you only hire a virtual assistant for 2 hours a week, it is well worth whatever that person is doing for you, because that's 2 hours of your life you're going to get back. So anyway, she's tracking all this stuff. She's got, I love a process. So she sends me over what needs to be booked. I look at my calendar and we get them booked. And so 25 shows in 6 months, you begin to find your voice. And like, I had no idea what I was going to talk about. I gave them a few topics just based off of my experience. And then that's how we got started, just building relationships and sharing stories. And it's just a great way to really jog your memory and figure out how to communicate with people in a new way, because it's not exactly a corporate way. It's just more about just sharing your journey and your process. And as an introverted person, a female in the South, usually I'm surrounded by these big, loud guys all the time. I don't talk a lot. So it was hard for me to find my voice that wasn't in a boardroom or wasn't in a conference room. And so this allowed me to do that as well without having to marry the idea, just date it a little bit and see if I liked it. And so at the end of the 6 months, I was like, I like this, because we can take that content and repurpose it and write stuff out of it, or do a voice to text with Otter.ai, different stuff. And so we go through this whole thing. And then I was like, well, I guess I could start a podcast. And I have a framework called Business Vitality. So it's all my life lessons through business that keeps business vital year after year, decade after decade. We all get back down to like the core things like communication, delegation, time management. And so I'm like, let's just interview people about how they keep their businesses vital. And so we started that process. But to be able to do that, you got to think about, who are you reaching out to and what's that experience? And so the whole CX, customer experience journey process, kind of came in from my corporate experience into the podcasting experience. And that's some of the stuff that you were just talking about. So I know that was a long answer.
I love that. Yeah, no, that was a great answer. And first of all, 25 shows that you got booked on in 6 months, that's amazing. I think also what I wanted to touch on here is that you need to delegate, because a lot of people, what I see a lot of people do when they start podcast guesting is they start doing the work themselves. And fair enough. Sometimes I feel like we do have to do something on our own to kind of get how it works, to kind of do it on our own, test it out, see like, okay, how does this work? How long does this take? Right. And then if you notice that it's taking a while, and if it's definitely not your zone of genius, delegate. Right. But a lot of times people do this and they do it on their own, and they get maybe they send out a bunch of pitches. They get maybe 2 replies back. And they're like, oh, well, I went on 2 shows and I don't think they really were a great fit. So I stopped trying to be a podcast guest. And I'm like, you went on 2 shows and you gave up? And you sent out, how many, pitches? And it's like, oh, I sent out like 10. And I'm like,
oh my God, we did 10 a week.
That was great. That was a pretty good turnout. So there's a whole process, and it's about trying it, right? And the more that you do it, the better that you get, and the more intentional that you can be with pitching. I think not just podcast guesting, but with any type of like outreach that we do in our business. I feel like the more intentional that we are, the less we have to do it, because you're more strategic. You have more of an understanding of like who you want to reach. And it becomes less of this like cross that we have to bear to be in business. So I think that's been the one takeaway from that I've had, and that I've seen, either my clients or other colleagues that they've gotten from being, from doing this process of pitching themselves to be a guest on podcasts. So I'm guessing now you went on several, many 25 podcasts over the course of 6 months. And then you were like, okay, I need to have my own platform maybe so that I can invite some of these people back, or so that I can, start sharing my own content. So what was that? What was that journey like of crossing that bridge from guest to host?
I just tried it, and I've started to research people that could host a podcast for me. And so I ended up hiring a group to do that for me. And then I began to see what the repetition in the process was. And so I ended up making one of, those decisions along the way. I said, I think I can bring this in-house because it's just not working out quite like I thought it would. Maybe I wasn't the best fit for their clientele or whatnot. I'm not really sure. But I saw an opportunity where I was just recording Zoom calls like this and then finding a platform like Captivate to post it. And I was like, gosh, we could boil this down and really create a pretty simple solution to be able to podcast, and then layering in Podmatch to be able to go find folks that I want to go chat with, really simplified the process. And then from there, the videos that you talk about, shooting some Zoom videos just to let people know, very short, but you got to be intentional about the message, about, what's the message that I want to give on day 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 leading up to the podcast. And, the first one's just kind of a welcome video. Hey, I'm Catherine. This is what I like to talk about, and I'm excited for you to be here. And then have a day to talk about equipment, because some people have never been on a show and they just want to be able to understand, can I use my earbuds, or what do I need to have? Don't be calling in from a coffee shop kind of thing.
Yes.
And then, what is a good idea? What are good topics to be able to talk about? And then the power of storytelling is another short video. So we stack this stuff in here. And then again, using an incredible woman who is my virtual assistant. I just don't have that much time in the day that I want to do like what you're saying. So, a 2-hour virtual assistant position's now, grown into just a few more hours. And I said, hey, are you up for a challenge? She said, sure. I said, how about you bring this in-house? And I just let her run with it. And the power of delegation and just saying, hey, when you have a question, let me know, but just see if you can figure it out and bring it in-house. And so probably 90 days after, I can't remember if it was 90 or maybe it's 4 months instead of 3 months, but we brought it back in-house, and we've been managing it ever since, and just have had a great response of people that want to be on the show. And I didn't even realize that so few podcasts actually last. I think it was past 8 episodes. So if you have more than 8, you are a hero in the podcasting world. Yeah, there's hundreds and hundreds of people that are out there, but nobody goes past 8 episodes. So, just to be able to stockpile 10 up in the front that you already have recorded and then begin to release them every 2 weeks or once a month, start small. If you just did once a month, that's better than nothing. You get to share your voice and your message, and you don't have to interview somebody every time. It could be you talking about, an experience that you have going on that somebody else could be learning from, and just being consistent. I'm convinced that consistent wins in the end, and continuing to show up and be present with other people and be present with the podcasting is going to be helpful in the end.
Yes. So 100% agree with all that. And I think, speaking of corporate women, corporate leaders who are still in their current positions, who are maybe thinking about the future, maybe they're a little worried about what's going on in the world right now. Or maybe they're just, maybe they're like you, and they're like, okay, I've been in corporate for 20, 30, whatever many years. And I'm kind of thinking of what else can I do, and how else can I use my skills to own my time more, to maybe have more financial freedom, whatever it is that their goal might be. And I truly believe that having a podcast can be such a great tool to have. So podcasting is not just for online business owners. Podcasting could be for somebody who is a corporate leader who wants to share that message that they have. They want to share their skills. They want to network. It's such a great way to network, to make connections without having to travel.
Mm-hmm.
So like Catherine said, you don't have to, if you don't have the capability of recording a podcast to go out every single week, you could start with every other week or even just once a month and stay consistent to that schedule, right? Like consistent doesn't have to mean every single week. It depends. I think it definitely depends on what the purpose of the podcast is. Obviously, for some people, I will tell them like, no, you really should be doing a weekly podcast, and it doesn't have to be an hour-long podcast. It could be a 10-minute show. But I think for corporate leaders, a monthly podcast or even, bi-monthly, that can serve to build their personal brands and to help them get out there, start to make connections, start to make a difference, start to have a social, an online presence that, who knows, it might help them, start a consulting business one day or land a better job or write a book, right? There's so much potential, and that's the beauty of podcasting and why I love it. And another point that I wanted to touch on of what you said is how you decided, you tried outsourcing podcasting and then you brought it back in-house. And I think that's also something to keep in mind, because there's obviously we can hire help from many, many different places, but a lot of times our businesses sort of become like an extension of us, and we're very, we treat it like our babies. But delegating is a must if you want to scale your business. But B, I think it's also important to really take the time to vet the people that you want to bring onto your team. And one of the things, as when we manage people's podcasts, we actually are a very boutique agency. And, I have courses and I do VIP days as well, but I don't the goal of my business is not to have like this, huge agency. I like having a few clients that I work very closely with so that they feel like we are an internal team. Like they know that we know their business inside and out. We know when they're launching, we know all their marketing plans. So I think it's important to really think when you're hiring team, whether it's a podcast team or even a VA or even a coach, right? You want to make sure that it's a good fit, because it really is. And it's happened to me where, you make a quick hiring decision, and then, a few months later, you're starting over again because it wasn't a right fit. And it's so much better to kind of go slow in the beginning so that you get a good fit, and then you can grow together, right? Like your VA was able to grow with you because she was the right fit for you. So I think that's another important message as you start a business, you grow it, you scale it. Don't hold back on hiring, but also, be intentional with every decision that you make in your business. Catherine, do you have any final words as we wrap up here on the show today?
I think if you feel the need to be able to share your story, I would definitely just encourage you to try to guest on a few shows. And I think you really got to go after just the volume and take a shotgun approach and just spray it out there and try to reach out to as many shows as you can. We reached out to hundreds of shows. For me, just to book 25 over 6 months. So, and then to be able to manage that high and low of being accepted or rejected, and then accepted and rejected, and then rejected and rejected and rejected. Hire somebody else to manage that process for you. Otherwise, your emotions are going to go along too. And your job's to keep the energy good, and to be able to say, yeah, you're not a good fit on this show, kind of like tears you a little bit, and like hurts. So if you feel the curiosity of what is it like to be on a show, hire somebody just for two hours a week. Think about how much money you're making right now in corporate. You are making probably more than, $20 an hour, and you can hire somebody to be able to do this. They can manage it in an Excel spreadsheet. You can see their efforts that they're doing, and just go with it and give it a shot and see if you enjoy it. Because I thought creating content meant I had to write, and I don't want to write. I'd just rather be able to show up with a microphone and chat with you for a little bit. This was way more fun and interactive than me and a keyboard sitting in a room typing. So, if you have the curiosity, I would definitely just go for it and see where it takes you. And don't give up just because maybe one or two didn't go well. I think you really got to get out there and have tons of different conversations, because you just never know where they're going to go, and your next idea could come from it. So thank you, Julia, for having me.
Yes, I love this conversation, Catherine. Thank you so much. And if people want to follow you, they want to learn more about you, where can they go to do that?
Absolutely. My name, my name and my website are the same, catherinecantey.com. That's with C's. You can also find me on LinkedIn under Catherine Cantey. And I do have a masterclass coming up on LinkedIn Live on Monday, May 22nd. And it's from 1:30 Eastern until 3 p.m. And I'll be sharing all the things that I'm teaching my clients right now in regards to how do you create measurable change, leadership change, and be able to receive that recognition that you may be missing out on, to possibly extend the career where you are, and be able to grow that way with accelerated results. So I'm super excited about that. So LinkedIn Live, Monday, May 22nd, 1:30 Eastern. And then you can always just find me at my website, catherinecantey.com.
Amazing. We will share those links. And thank you again, Catherine. Thank you for listening to us today, and we'll see you all next time.
Thank you for listening to the Elevated Femmes movement. I would love to hear your thoughts on the podcast, so please leave us a review. If you know someone who could benefit from the episodes on the show, please share it with them. We need more women elevating to their highest potential, enjoying all the great things in life, having plenty of time freedom for their children and loved ones, while doing things smarter and not harder, and growing a business that improves, not consumes their life. To connect with me and download my free resources, please go to www.juliamhickman.com.